Let's talk about the personnel change that's in the news tonight. This is really the Mattis job. This is Secretary of Defense. Mr. Shanahan has been the acting secretary, takes himself out of the running. At heart, this is a story about an American family. This is also a story about vetting and a lot of acting titles in the Trump administration. What do our viewers need to know about this story?
A tragic story on a personal level for Acting Secretary Shanahan. But putting that aside for a moment, looking at foreign policy in this administration, this entire episode, that vacancy now with another acting secretary, it leaves the impression for so many officials in this administration that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, along with President Trump, is in control of foreign policy. They do not expect a Secretary Mattis type, a strong personality, to be nominated. I hear veteran Secretary Robert Wilkie, he's on the top of the short list. He's a low-key person. They think it's Bolton, the national security advisor. He has a bit of a tense relationship with the president at the moment because he's a very strident hawk. But it's Secretary Pompeo driving the discussions on Iran along with President Trump. And the Pentagon is not expected in the coming year or two to be a major force on that front. Mr.
Shanahan came from Boeing, just a note to our viewers. And while Mark Esper, the Army Secretary, who's now running the Pentagon on an acting basis, did lobbying for Raytheon, in addition to that, he had a whole life prior to that. He fought under the umbrella of General McCaffrey in the Gulf War, Bronze Star, West Point, Harvard master's degree, Ph.D. from GW. So that is the man currently running the Pentagon. And Peter Baker, that brings us to the president's depiction of the situation with Iran tonight. Just in the last 24 hours, 1,000 American families have learned that a mom or dad, sister or brother are heading off on a deployment to the Gulf because we are beefing up force protection there. Here is the depiction the president gave the crowd tonight. We'll talk about it on the other side.
I withdrew the United States from the disasters. Just a disaster. A disaster. The disastrous Iran nuclear deal, and imposed the toughest ever sanctions on the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism. We're charting a path to stability and peace in the Middle East because great nations do not want to fight endless wars. They've been going on forever. Starting to remove a lot of troops.
Peter Baker, the removal of troops is not a story we've been covering.
Well, it's interesting. You know, what you've got here is a president who seems to be at odds with his national security team. But rather than the first-generation security team when Jim Mattis and Rex Tillerson and H.R. McMaster were there, seemingly intent on restraining a volatile president from going too far, now it's sort of the other way around. John Bolton is the hawk, as Robert said. Pompeo is a pretty strong conservative hawk on some of these things. And it's the president who's saying, wait a second, let's tamp this down a little bit. He's more than happy to attack Iran rhetorically and economically. But he said in an interview, I think, on Monday that the explosions on the tankers in the Gulf of Oman were minor incidents. He, it basically implied he wasn't going to take military action over that. He said, perhaps over, a nuclear program if Iran were to pursue that again, as they seem to be on the edge of doing. So it's not that you couldn't stumble into a war here, but I think his inclination, as he said at that rally tonight, is not to do that. His inclination is to pull back from the Middle East. He doesn't want to send more troops. And I think that he's kind of in this situation where his rhetoric on Iran is now being, measured against the actions that his advisors are suggesting he take.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.